The music was soft, the laughter rehearsed, gold forks flashing under chandelier light. Then my son looked up from his perfect Mother's Day table and said, clear as day, "Mom, do you like the $5,000 Clara gives you each month?" The room went silent. My hand froze mid-air, fork trembling. Around me, expensive smiles turned brittle, waiting for my reaction. Clara's voice floated in the quiet, syrupy, smug. It just helps her stay comfortable. Comfortable. As if I were a bill they paid to keep me quiet. I smiled, but something inside me broke so quietly no one heard, not even him. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 72 years old, born and raised in Savannah, Georgia. I used to be a school teacher, the kind who knew every child's favorite color and who kept extra sandwiches in her desk just in case somebody forgot lunch again. I was never rich, but I was steady. My husband, David, worked maintenance at the shipyard until his heart gave out one summer night when Marcus was only 12. From that moment, it was just me and my boy against the world. I worked 2 jobs for years, teaching during the day, cleaning offices at night, to keep the lights on and his dreams alive. I remember every spelling bee ribbon, every science project we built together at the kitchen table. He used to say, "Mama, one day I'm going to buy you a big house with gold handles on the doors." And I used to laugh. "All I want is a porch swing and peace, baby," I'd tell him. He grew up fast, too fast. College on scholarship, graduate school on ambition. Then came the business. A tech company I never quite understood, something about software and cloud storage. And suddenly, my son was a millionaire before 40. He bought a mansion in Buckhead, drove cars that cost more than the house I raised him in, and married Clara, a woman who always smiled with her lips, but never with her eyes. At first, I was proud. I told everyone at church about him. "My Marcus," I'd say, "the Lord surely blessed his hands." But blessings that come too fast can turn into lessons you never asked for. When Marcus invited me to live closer to him, I sold my small Savannah home and moved to a modest condo on the north side of the city. He and Clara helped arrange it, or so I thought. Clara insisted on handling the paperwork, the bills, even my groceries. "Mama Evelyn, let me take care of that," she'd say. "You've done enough in your life. Just rest." And for a while, I believed her. Then one day, she mentioned, casually, over coffee, that she'd set up a monthly allowance from their household account. "Just a little something to keep you comfortable," she'd said. $5,000. You won't have to worry about anything. It felt generous, maybe too generous, but I accepted it, not because I needed it, but because refusing would have made her uncomfortable. That's the thing about pride when you're old. It wears a softer face, the kind that nods and smiles to keep the peace. Still, every time that money landed in my account, something inside me twisted. I never asked for it. I didn't need it. My pension, small as it was, covered my bills. But Clara's gift came with invisible strings, little reminders that I should be grateful, careful, quiet. Whenever I offered to pay for lunch, she'd wave her manicured hand and say, "Don't worry, Mama Evelyn, you've already given enough." But I hadn't given anything. Not to her, anyway. That's what made Marcus's questions sting so deep that Mother's Day morning. It wasn't just the words. It was what they meant. That my worth to my own child could be measured, tallied, and displayed in front of strangers like a charitable expense. I smiled through the rest of that brunch. I even thanked Clara for the purse she'd bought me. Some fancy brand I'd never heard of. But my hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it when she hugged me goodbye. When I got home that afternoon, I placed that purse on the kitchen counter and just stared at it for a long time. I thought about all the times I'd skipped dinner so Marcus could eat, all the nights I'd sat in the dark, counting coins to keep the water running, all the birthdays where my gifts were the things he needed, not the things I wanted. Now my own son thought he could pay me like a bill. That night I didn't cry. I just sat by the window watching the city lights blink against the glass. somewhere beneath the quiet, something fierce began to stir. A low, steady hum that felt like truth, awakening after a long sleep. And I whispered to myself, if they think they're paying me, then it's time I see who's really holding the purse strings. When I think about my son, I don't picture the man in a designer suit sitting behind glass walls talking about shares and partnerships. I picture a little boy with scuffed shoes and a toothy grin, running down a dirt road with a lunch bag swinging from his hand. That's who Marcus was, before life and money changed everything. I raised him alone after David, my husband, passed. David was a good man, quiet, hardworking, the kind of husband who brought home wildflowers from the roadside and said, "They look like you, Evie, strong enough to bloom anywhere." But a good heart can't stop a weak one from failing. When the factory called me that night, I already knew. I could feel it, like the air itself had gone still. Marcus was 12, old enough to understand loss but too young to carry it. He didn't cry at the funeral. He just stood next to me, clutching my hand so tight my fingers went numb. That night, while he slept, I promised God that I'd carry us both, whatever it took. I worked 2 jobs for the next 10 years. Daytime at the elementary school, teaching reading and arithmetic, evenings cleaning offices downtown, places that smelled of coffee and ambition, places Marcus would one day belong to. When I came home, I'd find him studying under the flickering kitchen light, his notebook spread wide, his eyes determined. He used to say, "Mama, I'm going to take care of you one day. You'll never have to scrub floors again." And I'd smile, tired but proud, saying, "Just be kind, baby. That'll be enough for me." He got scholarships. He got into Emory, then Stanford. Every success felt like a shared victory. One for him, one for David, one for me. When I visited his campus, he'd walk me around like I was royalty. "This is my mom," he'd tell his friends. "She's the reason I'm here." Those words, I carried them in my heart like a hymn. But somewhere between Stanford and Silicon Valley, something changed. The calls became shorter, the visits fewer. I'd call and he'd say, "Sorry, Mom, just busy. We're scaling up." Scaling what? I never knew. Then came Clara. She was beautiful in that polished magazine way. Long hair, sharp heels, soft voice, the kind of woman who hugged without touching. Marcus introduced her at Christmas one year, all smiles. "Mom, this is Clara," he said, beaming. "She's everything." She shook my hand like she was meeting a client. I told myself I was being too harsh, that maybe city girls were just different. But when she called me Evelyn instead of Mom, something inside me shifted. Small things at first, little jokes about how quaint my house was, how I still used paper checks. Marcus would laugh, kiss her hand, and say, "Mom's old school. That's her charm." When they got married, the wedding was in Napa Valley. I'd never even seen California before. They flew me out, put me in a hotel, made sure I had a dress that matched the theme. Everything was picture perfect, except the distance between us. Clara's family sat close to the couple, taking photos. I sat 2 tables away next to business partners and investors I didn't know. Marcus smiled from the stage, but not once did his eyes find me in the crowd. After the wedding, I went home to Savannah with a full heart but an empty feeling. The house was quiet, the air heavy with memories. I tried not to dwell on it. I told myself, he's just busy, that's all. But busy turned into absent, calls every few weeks, visits only on holidays. Even his voice had changed. Smooth, careful, professional. When he finally called one spring and said, "Mom, come live closer to us," I didn't hesitate. I sold the house David built with his hands, packed up 40 years of memories, and moved to Atlanta. Clara handled everything. The movers, the condo, even the utilities. She said, "You just relax, Mama Evelyn. You've done enough in your life." I thought it was kindness. Now I know it was control. At first, it was pleasant. Lunches together, shopping trips where Clara paid for everything before I could open my purse. Then came the allowance. $5,000 a month, automatically deposited. I told her, I don't need all that. She smiled sweetly. Please, Mama Evelyn, it makes us happy. So I let it be. But slowly I realized it wasn't a gift. It was a leash. When I suggested taking a church trip to Florida, Clara frowned. Oh, that's a long drive for you. Maybe stay home. When I mentioned volunteering again, she said, You've earned your rest, Mama Evelyn. Don't overdo it. Every kindness had a cage hidden inside. And Marcus? He never noticed. Or maybe he did and chose not to. He'd call me Mom on speakerphone, his voice cheerful, but his eyes always somewhere else. The boy who used to bring me flowers from the schoolyard now brought excuses wrapped in wealth. I told myself to be grateful. I told myself this was just how modern families worked. Busy lives, less warmth. But every month, when that $5,000 hit my account, I'd feel something heavy settle in my chest, like I'd traded my motherhood for a payment plan. Then came that Mother's Day brunch, when my son turned my love into a line item. And in that silence, when his question cut through the air like a knife, something old inside me began to wake up. It was the same strength that buried my husband, raised my child, and kept a roof over our heads when the world looked away. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet fire would soon burn down everything false in my life. At first, I told myself Clara's generosity was just her way of helping. That's what polite women do. We excuse cruelty when it's wrapped in kindness. But with every month that deposit came, something in me shrank a little more. The money arrived on the first Friday without fail. I'd see the notification on my phone, that neat little message. Deposit $5,000 from C, Whitmore Holdings. I didn't even know she had a company. The first time I asked Marcus about it, he laughed. Babe handles all the finances, Mom. You don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. That word, anymore, sat heavy on my tongue. I'd spent a lifetime worrying. Bills, rent, tuition, groceries. Worry was stitched into my skin. But now, apparently, I'd aged out of it. I tried to use the money for small joys, a trip to the botanical garden, new curtains for my condo, but every time I reached for it, guilt pricked me. Clara always found a way to remind me of the favor she was doing. Oh, Mama Evelyn, she'd say, eyes wide with performative warmth. You don't need to spend that on us. Treat yourself. Get a facial. Her tone carried an unspoken addendum. Just don't forget who gave it to you. Soon, even simple things, choosing my groceries, planning a visit to church, started to feel like I needed permission. Once, when the church group organized a trip to Selma, I mentioned I wanted to go. Clara tilted her head, that same soft smile she wore when she was about to slice you open with sweetness. Oh, honey, that's a long ride for you. And those old buses? No air conditioning. Why don't you stay home? I'll send flowers to the service for you. I smiled politely, but inside something twisted. That trip was about history, about dignity. My parents had marched those very streets. Now I was being told to stay home because it was inconvenient. Marcus didn't notice. Or maybe he chose not to. He'd call in between flights and say, "Everything good, Mom? Clara keeping you comfortable?" I'd answer yes, because the truth would have required him to listen longer than 2 minutes. One afternoon, Clara came by with a shopping bag of vitamins and a bright smile. "These are the supplements my mom takes. Keeps her young." She placed them neatly on my counter, alongside a folder. "This is just some insurance paperwork, nothing big. Sign where the tabs are. It's for your protection." I glanced at the pages. Clara's handwriting, neat and looping, guided my pen to yellow stickers marked X. When I hesitated, she laughed lightly. "Don't look at me like that, Mama Evelyn. You trust us, don't you?" I did, or I wanted to, so I signed. Later that night, as I brewed tea, I stared at that folder. Something about the word holdings kept echoing in my head. I tucked it away, but unease lingered like the bitter aftertaste of burned coffee. Over the next few weeks, subtle changes crept in. Clara started referring to my condo as the unit. "We're renovating the unit soon," she'd tell decorators on the phone. When I asked what she meant, she waved it off. "Oh, just making sure everything stays up to standard. After all, it's under the family portfolio." Family portfolio. I didn't know I was part of a portfolio. That night, I sat by my window, the city lights blinking like distant memories. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who balanced her own checkbook and fixed her own leaky sink. I wondered when I'd stopped being that woman and started being someone's project. Then came the dinner party. Clara had invited a few of Marcus's business friends and insisted I join. "We'll seat you near the window, Mama Evelyn. You'll love the view." Halfway through the evening, one of the guests, a man in a tailored suit, raised his glass. "Marcus tells us his mom's got the best deal in town," he joked. $5,000 a month just to be adorable." Laughter rippled around the table. My fork paused midair. Marcus chuckled, cheeks flushed. "She's earned it," he said like a man tipping a waitress. Clara reached for my hand. "Don't mind them, Mama Evelyn. They're just teasing." But I did mind. I minded more than I'd ever admit aloud. That night, lying in bed, I replayed the words "best deal in town." Was that what I'd become? A bargain for my own child's conscience? When dawn broke, I couldn't stay still. I went to my kitchen, brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and opened my laptop. I scrolled through my bank statements, line by line, looking for the truth my heart already knew. Every gift Clara had given me was drawn from somewhere suspiciously familiar, an account that had my name on it. I didn't yet have proof, but my instincts were whispering loud now. Something wasn't right. By the time the sun reached my window, I'd made up my mind. The next deposit was due in 4 days. I was going to find out exactly where it came from and whose generosity it really was. The morning after Mother's Day, my house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort you. It accuses you. My breakfast sat untouched on the table, the eggs gone cold. I tried reading my Bible, but every verse sounded like a question. What have you allowed, Evelyn? What have you become? The words from the night before kept circling my mind like hungry birds. "Mom, do you like the $5,000 Clara gives you each month?" 5,000. Said so casually, as if it were my worth printed neatly on a paycheck. By noon, I decided to go over to Marcus's house. I told myself I just wanted to bring Clara a thank you card, something polite to smooth over the awkwardness. But deep down, I needed to see them, to see if they even knew what they'd done. Their house sat high on a hill with columns so tall they seemed to touch heaven. A car I didn't recognize was parked in the driveway. One of Clara's friends, probably. The front door was open, voices spilling out, cheerful, relaxed, like nothing had happened. I stepped onto the porch, unseen for a moment. Then I heard Clara's voice. "Oh, please, don't feel bad for her," she was saying, her tone light and sugary. "We give her $5,000 a month to keep her happy. It's cheaper than a nursing home." Laughter followed. Sharp, bright, cruel. My body went still. I don't know how long I stood there, gripping the railing until my knuckles whitened. That single sentence stripped every ounce of dignity I'd been clinging to. Cheaper than a nursing home. That's what I'd become to them. A discount burden. I turned and walked back to my car, each step heavy as if the earth itself resisted letting me go. I sat there for a moment, keys in my hand, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face looked the same. Soft wrinkles, silver hair, calm eyes. But something beneath that skin shifted. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was fire. When I got home, I poured myself a cup of tea. I didn't drink. I sat by the window, letting the steam rise and fade. That's when I started remembering. Really remembering. All the years I'd bent over backward for Marcus. The nights I'd gone without so he could have more. The birthday parties I planned with handmade decorations when all we had was hope and dollar store paper. The way I'd clapped the loudest at his graduation, even though my palms were red from cleaning offices until midnight. And now, after everything, he had let a woman reduce me to a tax write-off. I picked up my phone, scrolled to Marcus's contact, and hovered over the call button. My thumb trembled, but I stopped myself. I wasn't going to beg my own son for respect. Not again. Instead, I made a list. On paper, the way I used to when the bills were tight and every penny had to stretch. I wrote down every time Clara had helped me, the condo, the furniture, the monthly allowance. I wanted to see it all, and when I totaled the numbers, something didn't make sense. The amounts matched too perfectly. Not random acts of kindness, but scheduled disbursements. That's when a strange thought crossed my mind. What if it's not their money at all? The next day, I went to the bank. The teller, a kind young woman named Janine, smiled when she saw me. "Morning, Mrs. Carter. Need help with anything today?" "I'd like to check on the origin of some deposits," I said quietly. "Just want to understand who's been so generous." She pulled up my records, her fingers flying over the keyboard. All these deposits come from a business account, Whitmore Holdings." I felt my pulse jump. "Whitmore," I repeated. "That's Clara's last name." Janine nodded. "Looks like a joint managed account. One of the primary holders is also an Evelyn Carter trust." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "My trust?" I asked, voice shaking. "Yes, ma'am. It appears funds are being transferred from your trust into that account first, then deposited into yours." It hit me like ice water. They weren't paying me. They were paying me with my own money. I thanked Janine, holding my smile just long enough to reach the parking lot. Once I got into my car, my hands started trembling. Every word Clara had said, every gift she'd wrapped in false sweetness. It all made sense now. By the time I drove home, anger had settled into something cold and clear. I pulled out the folder she'd given me weeks ago, the one with my signature on yellow tabs. I read each page slowly, my heart breaking with every paragraph. Clara had set up that trust for my security, but the fine print allowed her full administrative access. She could manage assets for convenience. Convenience, that word again. They had taken my late husband's savings, rolled them into a structure I didn't understand, and then had the audacity to hand me my own money like charity. That night, I sat in the dark, the city humming beyond my window. The anger wasn't hot anymore, it was focused. I whispered to myself, "You wanted to make me comfortable. Let's see how comfortable you get when I wake up." And for the first time in a long while, I slept soundly, because I finally knew what I needed to do next. Find out just how deep their deception ran, and how to take every piece of my life back. I woke up the next morning before sunrise, my heart already steady with purpose. There was no more guessing, no more pretending. I needed answers, the kind written in numbers and signatures, not words soaked in sugar. The sun was just crawling over the Atlanta skyline when I pulled into the old brick building on Peachtree Street, the one that still had the bronze plaque reading Harper & Lyons Financial. My late husband, David, had used their services all his life. After he passed, the firm helped me move his pension and life insurance into what Clara later called a family trust. Back then, I didn't understand much about investments. I was a teacher, not a banker. Clara and Marcus had handled all the paperwork, promising it would keep me protected for years. I remember signing those documents over coffee, feeling grateful that my son had grown into such a responsible man. But standing there that morning, I realized maybe I had mistaken control for care. A receptionist greeted me. "Good morning, ma'am. Do you have an appointment?" "I'm here to see Mr. Graham," I said. "Tell him Evelyn Carter's here. He used to handle my husband's account." She typed something into her computer, then smiled. "Of course, Mrs. Carter. Please have a seat." I didn't sit. I couldn't. My legs felt too tight with nerves and anger. Moments later, a familiar face appeared. Older, with more gray hair, but the same gentle expression. "Evelyn Carter," he said, his smile genuine. "Well, I'll be. It's been what, 15 years? Closer to 20, I replied, shaking his hand. I need your help, Graham. Something's not right with my accounts. He gestured toward his office, and I followed him inside. The room smelled faintly of leather and cedar. The same smell I remembered from when David used to come here to plan for our future. I sat down, folding my hands on my lap, trying to keep my composure. I think my trust has been tampered with, I said. Money's being moved around and I don't understand how. Mr. Graham's eyebrows furrowed. Tell me what you've noticed. I explained everything. The monthly deposits, the company name Whitmore Holdings, the so-called allowance. I told him about Clara's paperwork, the folder, the signatures she'd rushed me to sign. When I finished, he sighed softly and turned to his computer. Let me pull up your file, Mrs. Carter. The room went silent except for the clicking of his keyboard. His face grew more serious with each screen he opened. Finally, he turned the monitor toward me. Here's what I see. Your husband's insurance and savings were indeed transferred into an estate trust about 6 years ago. Initially, you were the sole trustee, but 2 years after that, he scrolled further, a secondary administrative manager was added, a Mrs. Clara Whitmore Carter. He looked at me carefully. Did you authorize that? My throat tightened. I signed whatever she put in front of me. She said it was insurance paperwork. He nodded grimly. It's a common trick, unfortunately. The trust was altered so she could move funds under the guise of maintenance and support. Every disbursement she's made to you technically counts as fulfilling that purpose. So she's been using my money, I said quietly, to pay me my own allowance. I'm afraid so. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The betrayal felt like a physical thing, heavy and sharp, pressing down on my chest. I thought of David's tired hands counting those dollars, of the way he'd saved every bonus check for Evelyn's golden years. I whispered, he worked 40 years for that money. Mr. Graham's eyes softened. I know, but you still have options. You can revoke her management rights, reclaim full control. You'll need legal help, an estate attorney, someone who can untangle this properly. He paused, then added quietly, Mrs. Carter, I've seen cases like this before. They always start the same way. Love mixed with trust mixed with control. I nodded slowly, every word sinking deep. Do you know anyone I can trust with this? He scribbled a name and number on a notepad and slid it across the desk. Call Robert Jennings. He's handled elder financial recovery cases before. He's discreet and relentless. When I left the office, the morning had bloomed into full light. The sky was clean and blue, but my thoughts were storm gray. Driving home, I passed the school where I used to teach. I saw children running on the playground, laughing without fear, and I felt something I hadn't in years. Shame. Not for what they'd done to me, but for how easily I'd let it happen. I taught those children to stand up for themselves, to know their worth. And yet here I was, 72 years old, realizing I'd let my own worth be signed away one polite signature at a time. When I got home, I pulled David's photo from the mantel. He was smiling in his work uniform, grease still on his hands. I held that frame and whispered, I'm sorry, baby. I thought I was safe with our boy, but I'm going to fix it. I promise you that. Then I picked up the phone and dialed the number Mr. Graham had given me. A calm male voice answered. Robert Jennings speaking. Mr. Jennings, I said, steadying my breath. My name's Evelyn Carter. I think my son and his wife have been stealing from me. There was a pause. Then he replied, his tone shifting to something sharp, focused. Mrs. Carter, I'm very sorry to hear that. Tell me everything. And just like that, the teacher in me, the quiet, patient woman who once endured everything, stepped aside. The fighter took her place, because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect. It was about reclaiming the life I'd built, dollar by dollar, with my own 2 hands, and I intended to take every last piece of it back. Mr. Jennings' office sat in a quiet corner of Midtown Atlanta. Old brick, green shutters. the kind of place where things got done quietly. When I walked in, the first thing I noticed was the bookshelf, rows of thick law books, worn but loved. The second thing I noticed was how he looked at me. Not with pity, but with respect. He rose from his desk as I entered, extending a hand. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "I read the documents you sent over. You were right to come." His voice was calm, but there was steel under it. I sat down, my hands clasped in my lap. "Mr. Jennings, I don't want revenge," I began softly. "I just want my life back." He nodded once. "Then let's start there." He opened a folder filled with copies of the trust papers, bank transfers, and Clara's signatures. Every page was a wound I'd already felt. He tapped one with his pen. "This clause," he said, "gives Mrs. Whitmore Carter full administrative authority. But what she did here, transferring funds to her own holding company, crosses a line. It's self-dealing. We can challenge it." "Will that take long?" I asked. He gave a small smile. "Long enough for her to get comfortable. That's when people make mistakes." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. For the first time in months, I felt something that almost resembled peace. Someone was finally on my side. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Jennings and I met regularly. He moved like a chess player. Quietly, deliberately, every move calculated 3 steps ahead. He instructed me to stop touching the allowance money. "Let them think you're still playing their game," he said. "Meanwhile, we'll build ours." I did exactly that. When the next deposit came in, I left it untouched. And the one after that, it must have confused Clara because soon she called. "Hey, Mama Evelyn," she began, her tone syrupy. "I noticed you haven't used your card much. Everything okay?" "Just been staying home more," I said, keeping my voice light, "trying to live simple." "That's good," she said quickly, then paused. "Well, you let me know if you need anything, all right?" Her voice trembled, not with care, but with suspicion. I smiled into the phone. "Of course, dear." After that call, I knew she sensed something shifting. Meanwhile, Mr. Jennings uncovered more. He discovered that Clara had moved nearly $140,000 of my trust funds into Whitmore Holdings, citing maintenance of dependents' property. Then she had used part of that to remodel her own home and claimed it as a family expense. When he told me that, I felt my throat tighten. "They remodeled their kitchen with my husband's money?" He nodded. "And possibly the guest house too, but don't worry. We'll prove it." I went quiet, my mind filling with images of the polished marble countertops, the gold fixtures Clara loved to show off, all of it built on what David left for me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I made tea, sat on the porch, and let the night air wrap around me. The cicadas hummed, and I thought about all the quiet years of my life, how women like me were taught to be grateful, even when we were being stripped bare. But gratitude without dignity is just submission in a prettier dress. The next morning, I started making my own quiet moves. I went through every drawer, every file, every envelope Clara had ever handed me. Some were routine, tax papers, insurance. Others made my stomach turn. She'd listed me as a dependent in one of their joint filings. Dependent, like a child. I brought everything to Mr. Jennings. He scanned the documents carefully. "This is good," he said. "Very good. It proves a pattern. Financial control, coercion, misrepresentation." He paused, then looked up. "Evelyn, are you ready to confront them?" I thought about it. I pictured Marcus, my boy, the man who once made me birthday cards from construction paper, now a millionaire too blind to see the woman he'd become a stranger to. Finally, I said, "Not yet. Not until I have everything." So I waited. I played my part perfectly. I answered Clara's calls with warmth, nodded through Marcus's cheerful check-ins, smiled when he said, "Clara says you're doing great." Inside, I was building a storm. 2 weeks later, I called Mr. Jennings. "I think I know the perfect moment to reveal it," I said. "When?" he asked. "At Marcus's birthday dinner." He hesitated. "That'll be public." "Exactly," I said. They humiliated me in front of people. It's time I return the favor, but with grace." He chuckled softly. "Then let's make sure you have every fact at your fingertips. Truth is the best weapon when it's dressed in calm." The following days moved like clockwork. Jennings filed the first notice of revocation for Clara's trustee privileges, quietly, legally, irreversibly. By the time Marcus's birthday arrived, the paperwork would already be in effect. They just wouldn't know it yet. On the morning of the party, I stood in front of the mirror, wearing a soft blue dress and my mother's pearls. My reflection looked older, yes, but not weak. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. I whispered to myself, "You raised a man who forgot what love costs. Tonight you'll remind him." I picked up my purse, tucked the legal notice inside, and headed for their house. As I drove down Peachtree, sunlight spilled through the trees, painting gold on the pavement. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small walking into their world of marble and money, because I wasn't coming as their guest. I was coming as their reckoning. Marcus's birthday was always an event, the kind that made the society pages. Clara loved to show off. The invitations, the caterers, the guest list filled with people who smiled for cameras but didn't mean a word they said. But this year, it was more than a celebration. It was a stage. I arrived just before sunset. Their mansion glowed under soft gold light, the driveway lined with expensive cars, the air smelling of lilies and wine. I walked in quietly, greeted by a server with champagne. I didn't take it. My hands were steady, but my heart was a drum beneath my ribs. Inside, Clara floated through the crowd like a swan, tall, poised, perfect. She wore a red dress that seemed to demand attention. When she saw me, her smile appeared instantly like a reflex. "Mama Evelyn, you look stunning. Come, everyone's dying to see you." Her arm slid through mine as she guided me toward the main table. Marcus was laughing with some colleagues. Investors, I guessed. Men in crisp suits with polished shoes. He turned when he heard her voice. "Mom, you made it!" He hugged me, and for a brief second I caught a flicker of the boy I'd raised. It almost disarmed me. Almost. Dinner was served under soft music, the air filled with the murmur of moneyed people talking about stocks, travel, and things that cost too much to mean anything. I kept my smile. I waited. Then came the toast. Clara stood first, her hand resting on Marcus's shoulder. "To my incredible husband," she began, her voice smooth as cream, "a visionary, a leader, and the most generous man I know. You've built a life people only dream of, and you've never forgotten to give back, especially to family." She looked at me then, her eyes glinting. "Marcus, your mother is the definition of grace. You've taken such good care of her. I know David would be proud." Applause followed, polite, hollow. Marcus beamed, lifting his glass. "Well, when you've got a mom like mine," he said, "you can't do enough. She deserves every bit of comfort." I smiled, even as my heart twisted. Comfort. That word again. The way rich people said control. When the applause died, I rose slowly from my chair. The sound of my chair scraping the floor silenced the room. I looked around, faces turned toward me, curious, half expecting a sentimental speech from the old lady in pearls. "Thank you, Clara," I said softly, "and thank you, Marcus, for your generosity." Marcus chuckled. "Come on, Mom, you're going to make me blush." I smiled faintly. "No, baby, tonight I'm just here to make things clear." I reached into my purse and unfolded a single piece of paper. The soft sound of it opening seemed to echo. "This," I said, holding it up, "is the legal notice revoking your wife's management of my trust. As of this morning, she has no access to my accounts, my assets, or my name." The room went still. Forks froze mid-air. Clara blinked, her face paling beneath the chandelier light. I kept going. "For years, I believed you were giving me a gift, that the money you so proudly called my allowance was your generosity. But it wasn't, was it? It was mine. My husband's hard-earned savings, transferred, renamed, and dressed up as kindness. A few gasps rose from the crowd. Someone coughed into their napkin. Marcus's eyes darted to Clara. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I met his gaze steadily. "I'm talking about the truth, son. About how your wife used my own inheritance to fund this house, these dinners, those clothes. About how you let her." Clara stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You don't understand finance, Mama Evelyn. These are standard transfers." I cut her off gently. "Honey, I may not understand all your fancy numbers, but I understand theft dressed as love." A murmur rippled through the guests. Cameras lowered. The mask on Clara's face began to crack. Marcus's voice trembled. "Why would you do this here?" I took a breath. "Because humiliation shouldn't be served in silence." I sat through a Mother's Day brunch where my worth was announced like a price tag. "You embarrassed me in front of strangers, Marcus. Now I'm just returning the favor, but with truth, not lies." He opened his mouth, but no words came. Clara's hands were shaking now, clutching the edge of the table. I softened my voice. "I don't hate you, son, but I raised you to be a man of honor, and tonight I'm reminding you what that means. I didn't work 2 jobs, skip meals, and bury my husband just so you could turn my love into a paycheck." The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Then I placed the document neatly in front of them. "This is my gift to you, Marcus. The truth. No more allowances, no more lies, just distance." And with that, I turned and walked away. As I passed through the room, no one stopped me. Even the music had died. Outside, the night air hit my face, cool, honest, alive. I stood by my car for a moment, looking back at the house glowing behind me. Somewhere inside, Clara would be crying, spinning her next story. Marcus would be sitting in silence, maybe realizing what he'd lost, maybe not. But as for me, I felt something new blooming in my chest. Not triumph, not anger, something purer. Freedom. When I got home, I poured a glass of water, sat by the window, and whispered to myself, "You did good, Evelyn." And for the first time in a long while, I believed it. The morning after Marcus's birthday, my phone started ringing before sunrise. I let it ring. Once, twice, then 5 times. Finally, I picked up on the 6th call. "Mom!" Marcus's voice was tight, clipped, stripped of its usual warmth. "We need to talk. Now." I took a sip of my coffee before answering. "Morning to you too, baby." He exhaled sharply. "Don't do that, Mom. You embarrassed me in front of everyone last night." I let the silence sit heavy between us. Then I said, "No, Marcus, I didn't embarrass you. I revealed the truth you let someone else build around me." He groaned, the way he used to when I caught him lying as a teenager. "You could have come to me privately. You made it a scene." "A scene?" I asked softly. "You mean like the one you made on Mother's Day when you asked me about that $5,000? That scene?" For a moment, there was only his breathing. Then, "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that," I said, except this time I wasn't the one pretending not to know what was going on. He started to say something, then stopped. I heard Clara's voice faintly in the background, sharp, whispering fast. "Mom," he said finally, "Clara's furious. She said you misinterpreted everything. She was just managing things for you." "She was managing things, all right," I said. "For herself." He raised his voice. "You don't understand how trusts work." "I don't need to," I replied quietly. "I understand how respect works, and she violated it." There was a long silence. Then he said low, "You've really made a mess, Mom." I smiled to myself. "Then you better start learning how to clean up, son. I'm retired." And I hung up. By noon, there was a knock on my door. I didn't have to look through the peephole to know who it was. Marcus stood there, still in his suit from last night, his tie loosened, his face pale. He didn't wait for me to invite him in. Can we talk? I stepped aside. You're here now, aren't you? He sat down at my table. The same table where he once did homework while I cooked. The same table where I used to tell him stories about his father. But now he looked like a stranger, all tension and pride. Mom, you don't know what you've done, he started. The people there last night, they were investors. You humiliated Clara in front of them. I crossed my arms. You mean the woman who's been stealing from your mother? She wasn't stealing. She was managing the funds. The paperwork said... I cut him off. The paperwork said whatever she wrote. I signed what she put in front of me because I trusted my family. That's what I've done all my life, trusted you. Maybe that's my real mistake. He rubbed his temples, frustrated. You're letting Jennings poison your mind. You're 72, Mom. You don't need this stress. I looked him dead in the eye. I don't need your permission either. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. His eyes darted away. That's when I saw it. Shame. Small, fragile, buried beneath layers of pride, but it was there. Clara told me she was protecting you, he said weakly. She said she just wanted to make sure you were comfortable. That woman wouldn't know comfort if it wrapped her in gold, I said. She wanted control, Marcus, and you let her have it. He flinched. I saw his jaw tighten, but I also saw the boy I once knew, the boy who brought me flowers from the yard and promised I'd never struggle again. I softened my tone. Do you even know how much money she moved? He hesitated. She mentioned a few transfers. She used your father's savings to remodel your kitchen, I said flatly. His pension paid for those marble countertops you love so much. He looked up sharply, his expression cracking. That's not possible. Ask your lawyer, I said. Ask your accountant, but don't ask me to pretend anymore. We sat in silence. He stared at his hands, those same hands that used to hold mine on the walk to school. Mom, he said finally, I didn't know. I nodded. Maybe not, but you didn't want to know either. He swallowed hard, stood up, and walked to the door. I'll talk to Clara, he said. Good, I replied, but talk won't fix this. Integrity might. He paused, his hand on the doorknob. Are you really cutting us off? I met his gaze. You cut me off first. You just didn't notice. He nodded once, small, broken, then left. That evening, I got a call from Mr. Jennings. Mrs. Carter, he said, Clara's lawyer reached out. They're furious. She's claiming your mental capacity is compromised. Says you're not fit to manage your finances. I laughed, a deep, tired laugh that came from somewhere old and powerful. So now I'm crazy. That's their next move? Don't worry, Jennings said. I expected this. We'll counter it immediately. I've already arranged for a psychological and cognitive evaluation, the best in the state. You'll pass it easily. I smiled. Thank you. Let them play their games. I've played harder ones. That night, I sat by my window again, my cup of tea cooling beside me. The city lights shimmered in the glass. Once those lights had made me feel small, just another old woman forgotten in a world moving too fast. But now, they looked different. They looked like proof that even in darkness, some things still burned bright. And I whispered to myself, they thought they could silence me with kindness, but kindness without truth is just another lie. I knew then the fight wasn't over. It was only beginning, and this time, I wasn't fighting for love. I was fighting for respect. It didn't take long for Clara to strike back. By the end of the week, I'd received 3 letters, one from her lawyer, one from a so-called family consultant, and another from a private medical evaluator claiming to be concerned about my mental well-being. It was all written in the same polite poison Clara was so good at. Each letter used soft words like assessment, stability, and protective measures. But I knew what it really meant. They wanted to make me look crazy. They were trying to paint me as senile. An old woman confused by her own finances. It was a trap. If they succeeded, they could reclaim my assets under guardianship. For a moment, I sat in my living room, the letters spread out on the table, the morning light spilling over them like a spotlight. I could almost hear David's voice. When people can't beat your truth, they'll attack your mind. Well, not this mind, not mine. I called Mr. Jennings immediately. "Ah," he said, his tone steady but sharp. "I was expecting this." "Expecting what?" "The power play. They're going to try to have you declared mentally incompetent to overturn your trust revocation." I sighed. "You think they'll get far?" He chuckled. "Not a chance, but we'll let them think they might. It'll make their fall that much louder." That afternoon, Clara called me herself. Her voice came through the phone like syrup over ice, smooth but cold. "Mama Evelyn," she began, "I heard you got some letters. I told the lawyers to check on you. You've been under so much stress, and Marcus is worried." "Worried?" I said, my tone flat. "About what, dear?" She hesitated. "Your memory. You've been confused lately. Signing things you don't remember, forgetting conversations." I smiled into the phone. "Oh, I remember everything just fine, Clara. I remember the Mother's Day brunch, the bank deposits, the renovations that my husband's pension paid for. I even remember signing papers I should have read twice. But don't you worry, I'll be reading everything from now on." Silence, then a short, nervous laugh. "Well, that's good to hear," she said quickly. "We just want what's best for you." "Sweetheart," I said, "you wouldn't know what's best for me if it were written in your own handwriting." Then I hung up. A few days later, Mr. Jennings arranged an appointment for me with Dr. Harrison, a cognitive specialist at Emory University. He was polite, thorough, and professional. We talked for hours. Memory tests, reasoning exercises, emotional evaluations. When it was over, he smiled kindly. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "I'd trust you to run half the state of Georgia, let alone your own finances." His report was clean, strong, and decisive. A legal shield in writing. Jennings smiled when he saw it. "This," he said, tapping the folder, "is the nail in their coffin." Still, Clara didn't stop. She started calling my friends, church members, old neighbors, asking subtle questions. "Has Evelyn seemed forgetful lately?" "She's been acting paranoid, hasn't she? She's always been so emotional about money." But word got back to me, and when I walked into church that Sunday, everyone already knew what she was trying to do. My pastor, a gentle man with eyes full of wisdom, took my hand and said, "Sister Evelyn, don't let their lies shake your spirit. The truth's got a way of walking itself right into daylight." I nodded. "Oh, Reverend, I'm just letting the Lord and Mr. Jennings handle it." And they both work fast. By midweek, Jennings filed an official counterclaim, backed by Dr. Harrison's report, a witness statement from the bank officer who'd seen my clarity, and notarized evidence of the fraudulent transfers Clara had made. The response was devastatingly simple. It stated that the only person showing questionable judgment was Clara Whitmore Carter, for self-enrichment under the pretense of fiduciary care. When Marcus found out, he called again. "Mom, please," he said, his voice strained. "You're making it worse. Clara's upset. The press might find out." I took a slow breath. "You mean the same press that took your picture at your birthday dinner? Let them print it. Let the world see what kind of woman you married." "Stop," he said softly. "You're making me choose between you and her." "No, Marcus," I replied. "She made you choose a long time ago. I'm just reminding you who you picked." He went quiet. Then he said, almost brokenly, "I didn't know she'd go this far." "Yes, you did," I said. "You just hoped she wouldn't." A week later, Clara's lawyer withdrew the petition for my evaluation. Quietly. No apology, no explanation. Just silence. But silence, in my experience, is guilt's favorite disguise. Jennings called me with the news. "It's over, Evelyn. They've backed down." "Good," I said. Then it's time for me to make my next move. And what's that? Making sure they never have the chance to touch my life again. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of sweet tea, watching the sunset fade into gold. For the first time in months, I felt the peace of a woman who'd stopped apologizing for surviving. But beneath that peace, something stronger was forming. Not just healing, but purpose. They'd tried to take my name, my mind, my freedom. Now I was going to take back something they could never buy, my power. Because when a woman like me stops being afraid, people like Clara start losing sleep. And I had every intention of keeping her awake for a long, long time. By late spring, Atlanta's air had turned heavy. That kind of slow, sticky heat that makes you notice your heartbeat. But inside Mr. Jennings' office, the air was sharp, electric. He just laid the final folder on his desk, its pages thick with proof. Clara's empire of lies was about to collapse. She moved money through 4 different accounts, he said, tapping the papers with a pen. We can trace every transfer, from your trust to Whitmore Holdings to the home renovations and her personal spending. I stared at the numbers, each line a wound stitched with deceit. She used my husband's savings, I said softly, every dollar David earned with his hands. She washed it through marble countertops. Jennings nodded and claimed a tax deduction for it. That, Mrs. Carter, is fraud. It was strange how calm I felt. Months ago, I would have cried, but pain has a way of burning itself into something stronger. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. Will we need to go to court? I asked. Most likely, he said, but they'll try to settle before it gets that far. People like Clara don't like sunlight. Too many mirrors in it. He smiled faintly, and I returned it. Let them see, I said. I'm done living in their shadow. That week, we filed the petition, a full claim of financial mismanagement, elder exploitation, and trust abuse. Jennings attached every piece of evidence, emails, deposit logs, photos of the remodel, even Clara's own signature on the transfer requests. Within days, the whispers began. Someone from Marcus's circle leaked the story. Suddenly, my phone lit up with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Journalists, investors, even old acquaintances. I didn't answer a single one, but Marcus did. He showed up at my door 2 days later. No suit this time, just jeans and a tired face. He looked smaller somehow, like the world had finally pressed down on him. "Mom," he said, voice low, "please tell me you didn't file a lawsuit." "I did," I said evenly. "And before you say anything, no, it's not revenge. It's repair." He rubbed the back of his neck. "You don't understand how bad this looks. For me, for Clara, for the company." I tilted my head. "And how did it look when you let your wife treat your mother like an expense? Did that make you look good?" He winced. "You're right. I know you're right. But please, can we handle this privately?" I leaned forward, my tone soft but firm. "Marcus, when people rob you in private, justice deserves a stage." He went silent. Behind the guilt in his eyes, I saw fear, not of me, but of the truth, finally being louder than their comfort. "Does she even understand what she's done?" I asked. He hesitated. "She said she thought the trust money was family property." "She thought wrong," I said, "and now she'll learn the difference between property and theft." Before he left, I said one more thing. "You can stand beside her or stand beside what's right. But you can't do both." He didn't answer. The court hearing was scheduled for early June. It wasn't a grand courtroom, like in movies, just a modest chamber with wooden benches and a single ceiling fan spinning lazily overhead. But the air in that room carried years of betrayal. Clara sat at the defense table, her red lipstick too bright, her posture too perfect. Marcus sat beside her, hands clasped, his jaw tight. When I entered, their eyes met mine, hers full of disdain, his full of quiet regret. Jennings whispered, "Just tell your truth. You don't need anything else." When it was my turn to speak, I rose slowly, My knees ached, but my voice didn't. I was raised to believe love meant trust, I began. I trusted my son and the woman he married. I signed papers because I believed they had my best interest at heart. But love without honesty is just manipulation wearing perfume. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. I continued, calm but cutting. They told me they were giving me an allowance out of kindness. But it was my own money. My husband worked 40 years so I wouldn't have to worry in old age, and they turned that into a business transaction. Jennings placed the documents before the court. Transfers, statements, and the remodel invoices. Clara's face paled. When the judge turned to her, asking for explanation, she faltered. It was administrative confusion, she stammered. The judge's brow rose. Confusion doesn't remodel kitchens, Mrs. Whitmore Carter. Laughter rippled quietly across the room. When the verdict came, it was swift. Full restitution, revocation of all financial privileges, and an official finding of breach of fiduciary duty. Clara's name would carry that stain for life. As we left the courtroom, she brushed past me, muttering, "You'll regret this, old woman." I looked her straight in the eye. "No, darling, you will." Outside, the sunlight hit me like a blessing. The world hadn't changed, but I had. The truth wasn't just my defense, it had become my freedom. The news traveled fast. Within a week, people in their circle stopped returning Clara's calls. The investors pulled out. The magazines that once photographed her charity galas quietly deleted their features. Marcus kept his job, but his shine dimmed. He was no longer the golden boy, just another man who'd forgotten where he came from. He called me once, late one evening. I could hear exhaustion in his voice. "Mom," he said softly, "it's over. She's leaving. Took her things this morning." I didn't answer right away. I wanted to feel pity, but the well of that emotion had long dried up. "I'm sorry, Marcus," I said gently, "but endings are the price of bad beginnings." He sighed. "You were right about everything." "I didn't want to be right," I said. "I just wanted you to remember who you were." We sat in silence. Then he said, "You know what hurts the most? She didn't even love me. Not really. She loved what I could give her." "Then you understand how I felt," I said quietly. "All those years, giving everything and realizing it was only ever seen as a transaction." I could hear him choke back tears. "Can I see you?" "In time," I said. "When you stop seeing me as a problem and start seeing me as your mother again." He didn't argue, just whispered, "I'll earn that." Life slowed after that. My condo felt lighter, quieter. I replaced the curtains Clara had picked with ones I chose myself. Warm cream, soft fabric that let in sunlight. I began cooking again, real meals, not just tea and toast. I started volunteering with a senior women's group at my church. Most of them had stories like mine. Children who took more than they gave. Caretakers who turned into thieves. Hearts broken by family betrayal. But when I spoke, I didn't speak from bitterness. I spoke from survival. "Don't let guilt make you small," I told them. "Kindness is a gift, not a leash." One of the ladies, a widow named Lillian, took my hand after a meeting and said, "You speak like someone who walked through fire." I smiled. "Baby, I didn't just walk through it. I built a home in it and came out warm." Months passed. Seasons shifted. My peace grew roots. Then, one morning in late autumn, I found a letter slipped under my door. The handwriting was familiar. Marcus. I sat at my table, sunlight spilling over the envelope, and opened it carefully. "Dear Mom, I don't know if I deserve your forgiveness yet. I've spent months thinking about everything, about how I failed you, how I let someone rewrite our bond with dollar signs. I've started paying back the funds Clara took, not because the court ordered it, but because it's the only way I can look at myself again. I've also started volunteering at the youth center. They needed someone to teach finance. I tell them the truth now. Money can't buy dignity, and losing it once taught me what love really costs. If you'll have me, I'd like to come by on Sunday. No gifts. Just me. I held that letter for a long time. Tears came slowly. Not from sadness, but release. That Sunday, he came. No car with tinted windows, no tailored suit. Just Marcus. Plain white shirt, tired eyes, a small bouquet of daisies in his hand. We didn't talk much. We just sat on the porch, sipping tea as the afternoon sun painted everything gold. For the first time in years, there was no money between us, just silence, and something like healing. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest pain. By spring the next year, the air smelled different, lighter, freer. My life was my own again, and peace no longer felt like a luxury. It felt like home. I sold the condo Clara had chosen and bought a small cottage by Lake Sinclair. White walls, creaky floors, a porch where the wind hummed gospel hymns through the pines. It wasn't grand, but every inch of it was mine. Mornings, I made coffee strong enough to wake the truth, sat by the window and watched the water catch sunlight. Afternoons, I volunteered at the Women's Center, teaching other seniors how to read bank statements and spot deceit behind kindness. Sometimes they'd ask, "Aren't you angry?" I'd smile. "Anger is heavy, baby." I traded it for wisdom. Every so often, Marcus would call. The conversations were gentle, hesitant but healing. He'd tell me about his new job, smaller but honest work. I could hear something new in his voice, humility. One Sunday, he came to visit. No gifts, no agenda, just him. He helped me plant flowers in the garden. Blue hydrangeas, my favorite. When we finished, he said softly, "Dad would be proud of you." I smiled, brushing dirt from my hands. "Maybe, but I'm proud of you for finding your way back." We didn't talk about Clara. We didn't need to. Some chapters close best in silence. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the lake glowed gold, I realized something simple and beautiful. I hadn't just survived betrayal. I'd rewritten the story. Section 13, Final Reflection and Closure. 300 words, cinematic YouTube ending. It's been 2 years since that Mother's Day. Sometimes I still hear Marcus's voice in my memory. "Mom, do you like the $5,000 Clara gives you each month?" And now I can finally answer, "No, baby, I like peace better." I learned that respect isn't something you buy or beg for. It's something you reclaim when you stop apologizing for being strong. People often say, aging makes you invisible. But that's a lie. Age makes you see everything. You start noticing who claps for you and who counts what they've given you. I lost money, time, and a piece of my heart. But I gained something priceless. Myself.